Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fantasy Fiends Show. It's your boy Stevie Collier. Again, I'm here with my amazing best friend, 6'7", Andy Peliquin, and today we're honored to have Malorie Cooper, or as you know, MD Cooper. And I have a funny story of how I met MD Cooper, not in person, but when I first heard of her, was on a podcast, and I felt very defeated listening to her. So I was like, she's an amazing marketer. She's a mathematician, and she writes super quickly. And it's like the creative juices just don't stop. I'm very jealous, Mal. So I hope you give us some tips today on how to write as you do, because Andy is known as a writing machine, but you are like a generator. You write like 10,000 words a day, something like that.
I've actually kind of slowed down a bit.
I
only write about 5,000 words a day.
Okay,
because I'm just chilling out for this year.
I think Andy, you move around, don't you, around the scale?
Yeah, I've been taking it a bit. I've been more forgiving of myself when I have bad days. Essentially, it's like I am so tired. Today, I was, instead of editing this afternoon, like I told myself I wanted to, I did some like light, marketing business stuff, and I actually did it lying down in bed, and it was absolutely marvelous. And so tomorrow I'll be back at editing, like a madman. But
nice,
yeah.
Are you actually 5'7", Andy?
I am 6'6".
Okay. So yeah. I'm taller than you in heels, but that's it.
Oh, so you're way taller than me, Mal. I'm 5'8".
I'm 6 feet, but I own a number of 8-inch heels. So
how could anybody walk in something that big? That for
you
me,
got to be skilled,
it.
like Mal. You got to be skilled.
I walked the Boston Pride Parade, which is 2.5 miles on Boston streets in 8-inch heels. So
that is absolutely insane.
I have like feet that are somehow made for heels. I don't know what it is. It's just me.
I don't think I have the balance. I barely have the balance for, like regular shoes.
I did wipe at one point because I was carrying an umbrella as well, and a gust of wind caught it just a bottle when I went down. And I'm like, boy, I'm going to break my ankle, and paramedics are going to have to take me out. But luckily, I sprang back up and I was good to go. So,
were other people wearing heels as well?
I was the dumbest person there. Let's just put it that way.
And only the people sitting down on the float waving were wearing heels.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. So I have small feet. I have really small feet. So does that make me good for heels?
No, it makes you bad for heels, actually.
Okay.
Better because, it's all about the angle. The bigger your foot is, the less try and get the right, the less angle you're going to have. So small foot with a 6-inch heels like that.
Ooh, yeah. So I'd be falling forward.
Like yeah. So it's
okay. My brother
science to heels. I've actually spent a bunch of time studying heels to make sure I get the best ones.
Really? So they're pretty expensive though, aren't they?
Well, you gotta write a lot of books and you can buy a lot of heels, Steve.
I love that. Yeah, that's definitely.
It must be hard to find like big sized heels.
Not as much as you think, actually. Now that so much stuff is available online, you can get like if you guys want to get an awesome pair of 8-inch heels, you can get them on pleasershoes.com all the way up to size 16.
Wow.
Size 16. I'm a 10.
Yeah, you're all set. You can get heels easy.
Okay. Yeah.
Anything.
I'm lucky like that. This is the longest conversation I've had about heels. Like a little achievement box just popped up. Seriously, my mind's on video games. But I have more questions about heels, but that's just my personality because I just get interested in things. We're going to move on, and I have to ask you, Mal, please, do you want to go by Mal or MD?
Mal is fine.
Mal, okay. If you're looking for our books, it's MD Cooper on Amazon and Audible. Go get on Audible.
Yeah,
use your credit.
40 titles on Audible or something like that.
Just use all your credits on it. Mal, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm on the spot now. Well, I'm Malorie Cooper, or Mal. I write under MD Cooper, which was fortuitous because then when I transitioned from male to female, as you might have guessed by hearing my voice, folks, I was able to keep my same pen name. So that was pretty handy. I write science fiction. Everything I write is in one universe. So it's the universe is called Aeon 14. If you just search for Aeon 14 anywhere, you're going to find my stuff because by some stroke of genius back in the ancient days, I realized I need to get a name that no one else uses. So I made something up called Aeon 14. And now if you search for that, you always find my books. There are, on August 4th, there'll be 100 books in the Aeon 14 universe.
That is fantastic. I remember from your podcast episode that it was one universe, and I thought that was genius. And I always wanted to ask you this: is Aeon 14 like a sector? Is it a galaxy? Is it an alternate universe?
So Aeon 14 is a future history, is the way I would think of it.
Future history.
Yeah, stories. I've always loved history, and I loved like reading about lots and lots of history. And I always kind of wanted to write historical fiction, but I hated the fact that it would be wrong in 20 years. Like we'd learn something new, and it would end up being incorrect and whatnot. And I hated the idea of like writing books that'd be wrong. So I thought I'm just going to write about the future, but make it so detailed that it reads like a future history. And so the stories take place from about the year 2960 all the way up to the year 9000 is where all happens. So it follows a number of different characters throughout this time span.
And is it all like hard fantasy, or is there like science fantasy? I'm sorry, hard sci-fi, or like science fantasy thrown in as well?
Everything is hard science fiction in there, which means like every single thing that that happens is something that's based on our modern physics, but a lot of it, because it's so far in the future, is really extrapolated. So the very far future stuff basically reads like Dragon Ball Z fights.
Oh, nice. God, sounds awesome.
Because the characters, some of the characters aren't even human anymore. They've evolved, they've ascended into fifth and sixth dimensional beings. So they're actually able just to tear apart atoms with their minds and are basically firing nuclear fireballs at each other from their hands, kinds of things. So it gets just full on insane. They can like teleport across the galaxy and all sorts of stuff. But it's really interesting because you've got these types of characters that have evolved this far mixed in with like regular folks who are just walking around with pistols and stuff like that. And sometimes the super advanced characters lose. So it creates sort of this really fun thing. But some of these characters the readers actually followed through like dozens of books. They've shown up in different books and you see them through their progression throughout the years and stuff.
So when you kill one off, do you get a lot of backlash?
I mean, I don't do it very often.
Mm-hmm.
Also because in the future, you can just back yourself up. So characters have died and then just reappeared. So that does happen.
A fun fact about that, actually, in old canon Star Wars, you usually had a clone of yourself. So when you died, you could, just be cloned back at the medic facility. It was part of a video game. So I considered it old canon, but that is obviously...
Well, I mean, the Emperor also in the original canon just had lots and lots of clones of himself too.
Really?
And the one that Vader killed was a clone.
Oh, Star Wars.
Yeah, we talking Star Wars.
I thought I heard Stevie say Star Trek.
I meant to say Star Wars. I'm actually studying a Star Trek book on science fiction because I have a zero science fiction background. And that's my next question, Mal. Before I forget, how do you know so much? How do you know so much about math and physics? Is it your background?
No, I don't have a college degree or anything. I did grade 12 and that's enough school for me. But before I started writing these books, I actually spent 2 years studying astronomy and quantum physics and stuff like that. Because I wanted to make it so that once I started writing, I would just know everything. It would be like I'm writing about, driving down the street or walking to the mall. I wanted to make it so it'd be that seamless. And also because when you know the universe you're writing in that well, you can create realistic obstacles that are consistent for your characters, and it makes a much more believable story. So that's something I really want to focus on.
That's really cool.
And during this time, did you study like, plot and, beats and stuff like that? Just craft?
I have never once even cracked a podcast on any of those topics.
I have, but I do feel like sometimes they stunt you, it keeps you from being you, which a lot of things do, but, so you're just a natural then.
Well, I mean, I kind of lucked out. I mean, like anybody, I started writing stories when I was like 12 years old, and I didn't actually complete a story until I want to say I was like 25 years old. And it was Buffy the Vampire fan fiction. It was the very first time I ever completed a story. And that's sort of like a really empowering thing. Once you reach like the end and you're like, I actually told a story with a beginning, middle, and end. Like it wraps up and stuff happens. I find that to be the most empowering thing. And Jill, my wife, is also a writer as well. So we were doing a lot of writing, and I'm like, oh man, sometimes when I write these books, like some parts are just boring. And she's like, just skip them. So I did. I'm like, sort of my model became, if it's boring for me to write it, it's gonna be boring for the reader to read it. So I just skip all the boring parts. And in retrospect, I think what I've done is I've sort of picked up a style that's like writing Raiders of the Lost Ark. Because it's basically like, it's just climax. It's just these brief set piece repositioning things in between them, and that's kind of how I write everything. I just write the climaxes. which is just a lot of fun. So for me, I'm just writing action movies. And because I don't plot, I just pants it all. I'm actually just watching action movies in my head all day long. It's kind of what my job is.
That sounds a lot cooler than what the rest of us do.
That's exactly what I do. So I'm glad I'm not the only one. It's exactly what I do.
Cool. That's awesome. It makes it for a really fun job.
I know I get tripped up whenever I'm writing for the reader and not myself. So, I feel like, I probably should put this here to develop this character. And I'm like, no, what's cool that could, the rule of cool, what's cool that could happen right now. And I follow that. And
it still happens. Like the book I'm writing right now, we're basically pulling a patent. I'm doing it with a co-author, and we're pulling a patent maneuver in a futuristic battle in the Sol system where they faked out the Jovians thinking that there's an attack on Neptune when in fact the real attack's going to happen at Saturn, and they've like set up all these like diversions and whatnot. And I'm at 3/4 way through the book, I realized all the main characters are over at the diversion, and none of the main characters are where the real fight's supposed to take place.
Oh.
And I was like kind of struggling with him, like, how do we fix this? How do we fix it? I'm like, screw it. The main characters are over here, and the side characters are now like running the main thing, and like go for it. Because like stuff like that happens, So I just went with it.
Could you have done like I know this sounds ignorant, like a wormhole?
No.
Okay, that doesn't work.
Some of the people get that technology, but that technology doesn't exist when this story is written.
I got you. Yeah, the book I'm reading now barely went over wormholes. It's a concept, right? It's not even real. It's just a concept.
No, it's a fundamental component of special relativity. If Einstein was correct with special relativity, then wormholes exist.
Really?
And every piece of every test that they have done since Einstein proposed special relativity to prove or disprove it has supported special relativity. So wormholes probably exist. The downside to a wormhole, though, is that the opening is actually the event horizon of a black hole, which means it'll shred you to go through it.
You can't stop after the event horizon, right? That's the no turning back point.
You'll get spat out the other end, but you'll be energy.
I wonder if there's a cool way we could create like some kind of suit that doesn't allow you to become spaghettified. Isn't that spaghettification?
Stargate. Have you ever watched the Stargate TV series or movies?
Yes, I've seen the movies.
That's what the ring does in the Stargate ring. The ring basically makes sure you don't get spaghetti and it retransposes you back into matter. So it's actually a relatively common trope in sci-fi.
Okay.
The downside to creating a mechanism of instantaneous travel is now you have to start coming up with all sorts of reasons for why the good guys can't just save the day all the time. It's like, we had this problem. Why don't we just call like the whole army and have them come through the wormhole?
Right.
You're like, eventually I have to put people in real danger, and I can't do this now that I created instantaneous travel.
Wasn't that like a thing with Doctor Strange in the last movie?
Right.
They were pretty upset about that, I think. But then there's always the counter, and it's just
I mean, I don't know if you guys heard this one, but the best way that they could have actually destroyed Thanos was just have Ant-Man fly up his butt and then expand.
Seriously, that would have worked. He probably would have liked it. He would have liked it. And God, it's so funny you bring up Ant-Man. I was just thinking about him yesterday because I was like, God, if I'm I could fool myself all day and say, man, you're like a Star-Lord, Stevie. No, you're Ant-Man.
You are 100% an Ant-Man.
Because he's like, oh God. I was like, but I want to be Star-Lord. Tony Stark.
Like, why didn't Captain Marvel just grab him and throw Thanos into the sun? Like, seriously. So many options.
Don't they like they send her away so she's not even in the world at the point?
She's constantly like, I'm busy doing other things. You guys are on your own.
It's a little lazy, it seemed.
I think it's more like they've written themselves into a corner in the sense that they introduced this super powerful character and they have to literally find a way to hamstring her or take her off the map so that all the other characters are facing a threat that's impossible for them to defeat, which she could just have defeated in 15 minutes.
Like what they have to do with Superman. Like I can't read a Superman comics. I just don't believe it as much because I'm just like, I feel like Superman could have beat that guy up pretty easily. But don't get me started on. I like the idea of Superman, but this show is not about Marvel. I could go on, and Andy's made me into a comic geek, so it's his fault. Today we've got Whoa. I am getting ahead of myself. We even warned Mal of this, that we are going to show, didn't we? We did, right?
We did. You forgot to warn yourself that we're going to do it.
Yeah. But you know what? I do have something cool that happened this week. But does anyone else want to go first?
Go ahead, Stevie. Take it away.
Okay. Well, actually, I have bad news. The surfing was horrible. It was a horrible experience. I'm never going back there again. It was dirty. People were rude. Didn't get the surfboard I rented for $40. No one put masks on. It was just a big COVID fest, and there was a lot of drug use. I'm not impressed. So stay away from BSR Cable Park in Waco, Texas. It was absolutely terrible. And I've surfed in hurricane weather. That's how crazy I am about surfing. And I hated this. So, wow. But I was with my family, so that made it way better. We played Gloomhaven at night, and that really made my day. God, I love Gloomhaven so much. My cool thing today is that I just released a book, and I don't even tell my family about it anymore because I have, it's like a relic. It happens a lot now, but I have a bad time about not, congratulating myself on something cool like that. And I think as authors, we kind of underplay what amazing achievements we're putting out. I get wrapped up in negative reviews pretty bad. So like when I see a negative review, I'm immediately like, I'm the worst author in the world. I'm one of those.
It happens to all of us.
Wait, you get negative reviews, Stevie?
No, I don't. Mal, my best Facebook ads were where I used my 1-star reviews in the ads. That was funny. But yeah, good news for me is Mech Planet is out. Book 1 is at 99 cents for a week. So if you haven't grabbed your copy, I'd really appreciate it. And thank you very much for your support. It is a wild ride. And if you like weird stuff, then you like me. So
didn't you say you were loving the new game that you got to play?
Oh God, don't get me started. Ghost of Tsushima, if you don't have it, go get it. If you need to get a PS4, do it. Sell your soul, whatever. That game is amazing. I study Japanese, and I can put it in Japanese. It's samurai. It's so freaking cool. God dang, it's like the game developers made it just for me. So totally geeking out about that game. God, I love it so much. But I'm going to stop myself there because I will continue. So Andy, Mal,
Mal, why don't you go ahead?
So in the last week
or two,
I don't know this. I mean, I can't even tell what time, how long ago 2 weeks ago is at this point.
Right.
I mean, I guess one neat thing is that I'm getting back out in the world more, which is nice. And I live in a state where there's basically no COVID anymore, so we don't actually feel terrified when we go out.
Nice.
It's Massachusetts. We're only getting like I don't know, like 200 cases a day or something like that, which is pretty awesome. And everybody's masked and behaving themselves and whatnot, so you don't have to feel like you're at risk. But I go to a co-working office at a Staples, believe it or not, of all things. The whole back of the Staples is turned to like an office space with a cafe and a bunch of stuff like that. So it's just been nice to get back out into the world and just be around people. And on top of that, my sciatica has been killing me for 7 weeks now. And this week, my back almost doesn't hurt at all anymore. So I'm stoked about that because I like wearing heels and corsets, and you can't wear those when you have sciatica. So
yeah, I'll tell you right now, not having back pain is 100% a great turnaround for a week or a month.
That is, yeah. And I guess the other great thing is like I said before, August 4th, my 100th book comes out. So I'm like stoked in advance for that.
That is cool.
I mean, it's almost unbelievable to me, which is just so cool. I know one day I'll be there, but it will be many years. But congratulations, Mal. You heard it first here on the Fantasy Fiends show, by the way.
The thing that I guess I'm super excited about that too is November 2nd of 2016, I released my 4th book. So it's been
4 years, 3.5 years.
3.5 years for 96 books.
That is amazing.
I'm like the Hulk of books.
Yeah. What's that guy's name? Michael Anderle, I think. What is his name? Michael Anderle. He releases tons of books, but he doesn't write them. He writes some of them, right? Okay. Yeah. So he doesn't count. You write your books. I mean, I'm not saying it's bad.
Michael Anderle is probably solo written like at least 60 books, I'd say. So he's
wow.
He's got a lot of books. Yeah.
So he's up there. Okay. Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about him except that he co-wrote with Brandon Ellis, right? Is that his name? Brandon Ellis. Great guy. Awesome. Andy, it's show and tell.
I guess some great news is yesterday I finished the 8th book in my 12-book series, clocking it at 110,000 words, like almost exactly.
Whoa.
Yeah, my stories just tend to get longer and longer because things get more complicated. And then today I finished the final edits on book 6, and by early next week I will have the beta edits done on book 7 and be starting on book 9, which always makes me happy. My goal is to finish it by the 12-book series, the last 4 by the end of the year, and I'm still on track. I've got 4.5 months, or just like exactly 5 months to do 4 books, and I think I can make it.
Yeah, you can absolutely do that.
Unless they keep getting longer and longer, which they've unfortunately been doing. Like I started at 80,000 the first book, 90,000 the second book. The last 3 have been like 100 to 110,000.
You gotta stop that. You just gotta kill off a side character that's chewing up too much room.
Yeah,
this next one might be shorter or not.
I'm at 44,000 words, and I was asking Jonathan Yanez, like, how big do you want this? Do you want me to go to 60? Do you want me to go to 70? I could stop it at 55. Mal, what do you think?
I got no idea what you should do.
What's your average for a sci-fi book?
70 to 80.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, 65, 75.
I mean, part of it is you want to, from a marketing standpoint, you want your KU reads to be worth it. If it's too short, you're just not going to get enough money out of Kindle Unlimited. It's going to cost you money. So you got to kind of, I think 80 is really the sweet spot. And then if you do audio out of it, 80 gets you an 8-hour audiobook, which sells a lot better. Audiobook buyers really look for like at least 7.5, 8 hours when they're going to go use their credits. So
nice. Gotcha. Yeah, I mean that completely makes sense. Well, Andy, dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a good feeling to be done with that one, because this one kicked my ass a lot. It was just every time I started off writing just this straightforward action series, right? And then every single book has added some new complicated element. This latest one has been sort of the breakdown of your liver and kidneys, exactly what happens and how to stop it. Like, I don't know this stuff. So every book has just been insane.
Well, awesome, guys. So we are going to move on to our topic today, which is a utopia, both simple and achievable? Question mark?
Well, so I this was Mal's idea, but I liked it because it was like, I mean, in my head, I can't think of a single science fiction or dystopian novel where there is a functional utopia. Every single utopia, it starts out that way, and then it ends up devolving into, it's just unrealistic. But this one that Mal suggested, it was perfect because it's not everything is perfect and all problems are gone, but it is, in a way, just this world where things are so much better. Do you want me to read what you wrote, Mal, or do you know it offhand?
You should read it because you're describing it way better than I think I did.
So she said, sorry.
All right.
I envision a transcendent future where humans get past a lot of the things that hold us back now and are far less restrictive in how we allow one another to function. And honestly, if you look at the world today, you've got so many divisions. You've got so many people saying, there is this line and I'm on this side and you're on that side. If you look at what's going on right now in Portland, you can see so many different kinds of divisions. Ever since the George Floyd incident, there have been massive, massive divides in the country. And honestly, it's just an escalation of all the divides that there have been for so many years. And so instead of it being everything is perfect, this utopia idea that Mal presented was we just allow each other to be ourselves and accept that. And it sounds super simple. In a way, it kind of is super simple.
It really is.
It takes a lot of work to kind of get to that point. But in the end, it comes down to I am me, you are you. Let's accept each other for who we are. And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And what keeps us away from that?
Everything. I mean, if you look at, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mal.
I mean, the answers are not necessarily ones people like to hear.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to, so I'm one of the sorts of people, I believe that where we are today, and many times the problems we have today are because the problems for today are yesterday's solutions. Like a great one that people don't think about is the savings and loan scandal of 1980. Where they had to deregulate all this stuff, make all these changes and whatnot in the United States economy, caused the crash in 2007, 2009, that phase. It's always the previous solution causes the next problem because humans are lacking in crystal balls, as it turns out, and we can't really tell what's going to happen in the future. So whenever you point at the problem, the cause for a particular issue, you have to remember, like, okay, it wasn't that everybody was an idiot back then. It was just the thing that we had to do to survive. And like another great example is, you guys might remember this. Back in the late 70s, there was this whole thing about the population bomb. And even Time magazine even had an article, The Population Bomb. And the idea was that we were going to run out of food because they'd actually done a bunch of study about the amount of food the world could create. And they determined that in the late 70s to early 80s, 1 billion people would die of starvation on planet Earth. And before Time magazine printed that article, 2 very smart individuals worked out how to crossbreed different types of corn and different types of grains to be able to make it so you could grow corn and grain pretty much anywhere on the planet. And we added 2.5 billion people, 3 billion people, and we didn't run out of food. So, but now we have all these problems with dietary problems from GMOs and new foods and whatnot. So we're like, oh, it's so terrible that we did all this stuff modifying all these foods. Like, well, my gut's not too happy when I have a lot of grain, but 1 billion people didn't die. So, but a lot of times we look at the past, we don't have that context. We're not remembering the decisions that happened before. I think a really big thing that will change things in the future is longer lifespans. People are just going to remember. They'll be like, we did this shit like 50 years ago. Let's not do it again. Whereas right now, not a lot of living people can remember the unrest that happened in the 60s, the social, the civil rights movements and whatnot, and what that really were involved. People are like, this is an unprecedented thing. It's like, so far, no one's brought out fire hoses on people and started trying burning down university. Like, if you were to really kind of look in detail of what's happened in the past, it's actually not too shabby. The British have not invaded like they did in 1812. No one's trying to burn down the White House. Like but it's hard for people to keep that context in mind. But I think when people start living longer, we're going to be better. And the other thing, I hate to say this because this is a tricky one, is it's religion. Religion is
and politics. And politics is another one that you can probably go hand in hand.
Politics is mostly just an extension of religion. I mean, that's
a fair point,
or at least zealous ideology. And the whole thing behind religion was like, okay, morality is hard. We're all just trying to live. Like, this is like 10,000 years ago. And the king told you to behave, or the tribal leader told you to behave, but whenever he's not looking, you're doing whatever the hell you want. So let's make up God. Now God's always watching, and if you're not good, God's going to get you when you die. And if you look at all religious texts, they're basically all about like, look out because God's watching you. It's a way to make sure that people behave. But the other thing is, if you read most religious texts, we are far more moral now, which is hard to believe in some cases, than these religious texts are. Like, pretty much every religious text involves killing women if they have adultery. like we are far more moral than that. We're not murdering people for really basic things, but they had to because they didn't have a prison system. They couldn't deal with a lot of criminals. If someone did a bad thing, you had to kill them. You had no way of managing criminals running around in society. So we have to really start taking a long view, quite honestly, and hopefully as we extend our lifespans, I think that's going to be the main thing that's going to cause us to start taking a longer view.
Go ahead, Stevie.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm studying the very final bits of the Bible right now, and I'm shocked as to how many, I guess I could say lies, I think misinformation, because people don't know or they really haven't read the Bible, my religion teachers. And I'm like, it doesn't say anything about confirmation. There's nothing in there about abortion. The word abortion is not in the Bible. And yes, the church was established at the end of the Bible, but it didn't say, come on Sunday, give us money, and here's the Pope. It doesn't say anything about any of that. It's just something we created for power.
There's some effed up stuff in the Bible. Like, one of the tests to see if a woman had committed adultery in the Old Testament basically was that if she lived, she hadn't committed adultery, and if she dies from terrible gangrene poisoning in her vagina from the thing you stuck in there, then obviously she was adulterous.
It's sort of like those things of ducking the women to see if they were a witch, if they drowned their witches.
Basically, and there's rules for how you can treat your slaves in the Bible. A lot of rules about how to treat your slaves in the Bible. It's like, we are far more moral than this book is now. I know people don't like hearing that. But I think at a certain point, people start looking at the Bible more as this was a way to make it so that civilization didn't crumble 4,000 years ago. Now let's basically look at the parts where people are talking about how to live a good life. And if you look at the words in red, what Jesus said in the Bible, Jesus was actually a pretty chill dude. Jesus hung out with hookers in the mob. That's basically who Jesus hung out with all the time. Fishermen, hookers, and the mob. Like that's where he was. And he was a really decent person. Like people like to say he must have been Irish because his very first miracle was turning wine.
He was a big partier, which I didn't know.
Yeah,
he was a big partier. He denied not one party, even ones that he knew he was going to get made fun of at, which is just so cool. I was like, I wish I had balls like the J-Man. The J-Man.
It would be hilarious to see like all the stuff that didn't get written down, where Jesus had a little bit too much wine and he was like, "Yo, my dudes," just those kind of conversations.
I would do anything. I mean, it would be in Aramaic, but I would still enjoy him just going, "Oh yeah."
I love you guys. You're the best.
It would be in Greek, but there's a lot
he was speaking Greek at that point.
Well, I mean, the majority of the New Testament's written in Greek. Very little of it's written in Hebrew. And there's only one book written in Aramaic in the entire Bible. That's Job. I think I've read the Bible cover to cover 9 times, and I've read some parts.
Wow,
30 times. So I have a pretty good understanding of the book.
That is a huge
side note, by the way. Ancient Hebrew had 6 genders. It was not a binary gender system. It might have had 8, depending on how you interpret certain things. So the Hebrews recognized six genders. And on top of that, like the word homosexual was put in the Bible in 1946.
I wonder why.
Yeah. And there's other things like the Bible talks about sodomy. And people think of sodomy as having anal sex, right? And they're like, sodomy is bad. So a lot of places in the Bible, the word sodomy existed before the word homosexual. But the problem is that the Christians who read the Bible much later got the whole Sodom and Gomorrah story wrong. The Sodom and Gomorrah story is about God says to Abraham, I'm going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah because it's all full of bad people. And so he's like, look, my nephew Lot lives down there. He's a good dude. So if you find one good guy, then keep the city. And so they went, the angels go down and the townspeople come and say they want to have sex with the angels. And Lot says, no, here's my daughters instead. And everybody thinks like, oh my God, it's all about anal sex. That was the bad thing. And then these people went and raped the daughters. And the actual reason why Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed was because the people were inhospitable. Because in Hebrew and Aramaic culture, if you bring someone into your house, you have to protect them even above your own family members.
And that thing of once you've had salt and bread with them, they're honored guests.
Yeah, and so if Lot was actually, according to the Bible's morality, Lot was doing the moral thing by sending his daughters out to be raped by the townspeople versus the people that he brought into his house. And that actual act was proving that he was a moral and good person. Now we would look at that and think this is the worst thing I've ever heard of. No father should ever do this. And of course, everybody thought that Sodom and Gomorrah was punished for sexual sins when the whole punishment on those cities was for inhospitality. So even the word sodomy is actually incorrect as to what it means.
Wow.
It also reminds me of that story where the guy threw his daughter out and she got raped and dismembered in exchange for bringing the guys inside so they didn't get hurt, which I think that's in Kings. It shocked the crap out of me. I was like, this is...
Well, don't forget the one in the book of Elijah where a bunch of kids made fun of Elijah. So Elijah,
yes, I know,
bald head.
They called him bald. Yeah,
and then he summoned lions out of the forest to eat the kids.
Bears, 2 bears.
Bears, bears. I forget now. There's a lot of bears and lions eating bad people in the Bible.
Oh,
or the dude I got was the dude who's like, the ark almost fell off the cart, so I put my hand on it to steady the ark.
And he gets killed.
It's like God's a dick to this guy. The guy's just trying to keep the ark from falling, and you kill him. Like, wow, it's hardcore.
Hands off. So with Utopia stuff, I always think back to Brave New World.
Yeah.
Because we had to write a paper, is it utopian or is it dystopian? And the common thing is it's dystopian. Of course, I have to say why it's utopian. But the problem is to consider Brave New World a utopia, you have to delete certain freedoms.
And that's really what every single dystopia essentially does. I mean, look at Divergent. That's the one that I think I enjoyed reading the most, was the Divergent. The way that they divide all these people into the houses. Just the fact that you are divided into a house takes away your free will of what you want to do. That right there sort of makes it a dystopia. And then, of course, all the other stuff that happens. Or Equilibrium. That is one of my favorite all-time movies.
I love that movie.
And if you look at it sort of on the surface, it's this, peaceful community, but then you go a little bit deeper and you see, that the literature is gone, the painting is gone, sort of the Fahrenheit 451 thing. And then you realize just how constricting it is. And the idea behind Mal's utopia, it was that it was the opposite. It was this sort of acceptance of everyone, the freedom for people. If people want to live a certain way, do that. Don't inflict your religion, politics, race, gender, whatever it is on me. You do you. Be happy. I can accept you just the way you are. And you're going to do the same thing for me. And that's really, really, really hard, because right now, every time we see someone who sort of threatens the idea of what we feel is safe or what we feel is familiar, that right there sort of causes this internal upheaval that we respond to negatively to it. So it's why you have all these people who are responding so negatively to the Black Lives Matter movement. Instead of saying yes, they're like, yes, but I'm also feeling threatened, so I'm going to respond this specific way. So all of these things, it's all about sort of getting past this idea that accepting someone else is going to somehow change who we are or somehow interfere with what we want and think is, acceptable or right in life.
So would you guys say there is a utopia that exists today, or is it just impossible? Is it subjective?
It's tricky.
China.
Because we're all humans. I guess so. One of the interesting things about utopia is that you have to accept the beginning. You have to accept the fact that utopia is never going to be perfect, and that its lack of perfection is actually the thing that will make it utopia. But the biggest problem we have now, like Andy was saying, is people telling other people what to do. Like, for example, there are people out there who don't believe I should be allowed to use the women's bathroom, and there are people out there who don't believe I should be allowed to use the men's bathroom either. So it's like you're all the way down to like these base rights of like, where do I pee? And so trans people have the highest attempted suicide rate and the highest successful suicide rate out of any group of people. It's 42% of trans people attempt suicide. The only reason why trans people attempt suicide is other humans. In fact, you could probably make that argument for just about everything. Why do people die from anything other than disease? Other humans. Why do people kill themselves? Other humans. So if other humans would just stop like making life miserable for each other, we would all do a lot better. And the interesting thing too is we're still at this sort of point in our development as people where we're worried we could lose everything at the drop of a hat, because we've seen it a lot, like World War II. Like the entire world almost lost the world, and stuff like that. So people have this thing, we have to protect what we have, because if we don't, we could lose it, and that underpins almost everything that we do. And that's why like people who are like different political ideologies don't want to change their political ideology, because they're like, I worked so hard to get this stuff, and if things change, I could lose it. Because all we really care about is security for the future. That's really the number one thing we care about. But we've created this scenario where everybody feels like they have to, where they are right now is a hill they have to die on, to defend it, and so, for example, like people who are trans, people are like, well, what if you're wrong? It's like, right now there's such a struggle to even be trans that no one would ever admit they're not trans because of how hard it was to get there. And then they're going to look like an idiot for being wrong, So we have to like be able to accept that it's okay to be wrong, that not everything is a hill we have to die on. And we have to hopefully get our civilization to a point, which we could, we're already there, we just don't do it, where everybody could have security and safety. And once we sort of get to that base level where we're like, okay, no matter what, you're not going to starve, no one's going to like strip you of your rights and throw you in a hole, stuff like that. Once we sort of get to that basic level where it's like, you know what, no matter how much you screw up, you're going to be okay. Then I kind of feel like we're going to stop trying to force people to be whatever we need them to be as much.
So my brother just brought this up today, and he's like, if we could just stop telling people what they need to be and what they need to believe, everything would be a lot better. And he's like, that's actually domestication in biology. And I was like, whoa, because he's studying some book, but I thought it was really interesting to me. I never thought about it. So now I'm not going to try to push my political views on somebody. I'm just going to listen to them. Mm-hmm. I had a question for you, Mal, and you too, Andy. And now I cannot remember. Oh, do you think so with COVID-19, I noticed that people were, all for themselves and not really helping their fellow man. Do you think tribe mentality is going to be a problem? Like just a continuous problem? Like you're just worried about your friends and family. You don't care about anyone else outside of that tribe. Or does that have nothing to do with you know.
Well, humans are territorial creatures, right?
Mm-hmm.
By nature, we build cities and gather together to be in a herd and to protect ourselves and others from the dangers, the predators, all of that, right? This is the way that humans have acted. At the same time, coming together in cities leads to the sort of infighting that would never have existed before. So it's this weird thing, and I do think that people will always look to be protecting what's theirs. Now, I will tell you that some cultures and some countries are much more aggressive about it. If you I mean, having lived up here in Canada for 2 years and hearing the way that people talk here versus the way that people talk in pretty much every state that I've visited, there is a massive difference in territorialism. You know, the whole fact that the stand and what is it called? The stand and protect or something like that, where you can shoot people coming onto your property.
Is that a thing?
Yeah. A lot of states have that. It's like,
right?
Is that in Texas? It can't be in Texas, can it?
Stand your ground. Stand your ground.
Yeah, stand your ground. There you go. It is 100%. That is the definition of Texas, in fact. That is the new state motto. No,
God, that's the truth.
I think it is also legal in certain parts of Canada. And I've heard stories from some friends of mine where they were, where someone did it, they were just parking on the edge of the ranch and the guy was standing on the, on the porch holding a gun, looking at them like, what are you doing on my property?
Yeah.
But I don't think it's anywhere to the same extent as it is in many different places of the US, and the way that people talk here in Canada versus the way that they talk in a lot of the states I visited is far less about mine and yours and the very clear distinction between. It's much, I guess, because the Canadian government and, this financial system is much more socialist. So there is a greater sense of ours than the Declaration of Independence set the tone for the US in the sense that I am independent from everybody in every single potential level, my independent government, my independent state, my independent, city, everything is all about that personal independence and freedom versus the more socialist structure of the Canadian people. So I think some cultures definitely make it much more that clear divide.
I think, yeah, and that's a lot of it comes down to, I think part of it comes down to space. There's just more room in Canada, but at the same point in Canada, you have to band together to survive in a way. Like I grew up in Saskatchewan. I'm Canadian. I was born and raised there for 20 years. Saskatchewan has a population, at least when I grew up was a kid, about 900,000 people, and it's 3 times the size of England.
Wow.
Yeah. If you didn't have a strong social safety net, in fact, Saskatchewan is the place where government healthcare was founded because there was just no way for the people to manage their own healthcare when they were that spread out. It required a government healthcare program. So yeah, I feel like people need to understand that it's like, I don't know, there is an element of selfishness that we're facing right now that we're going to have to get past. But I hope that as we like maybe figure out a way to make it so that not everybody has to scratch and claw for everything in their lives, that we won't have to hold on so much to the few things we have.
Something you said, sorry, so are you finished?
Yeah, I'm good. Go on.
I was going to say something you said earlier about the people who transition and then realize they're wrong, right? That idea of wrong is, so I'm watching SWAT, the TV show with my boys, and the last episode was a former SWAT officer who was on the verge of committing suicide because he was feeling all of this negative stuff, but he was too proud to be weak. Right. And again, you hear, the 22 are military personnel who commit suicide every day. Like there's so many people. And again, the transgender community, the rest of the LGBTQ community, all of these people, they're so afraid of being wrong or being seen as weak or having made a mistake. And that I think is one of the biggest sort of obstacles to reaching that, because, with the whole concept that sexuality is a spectrum, if someone transitioned, they realize it wasn't exactly what they were looking for, they have other options out there. Sort of like people who start out as, say, heterosexual and then realize that, okay, maybe I'm bisexual, and then maybe they realize they're pansexual, and then their sexuality changes and they go back to bisexual, or, like it's sort of that fluctuating thing. And that fear of being wrong or being seen as weak, or the fear of rejection, is a huge element. So if we could get past that, I think it's amazing how in the last, I don't know, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, there has been this massive push towards just improvements in psychological and mental health. And that has done a massive amount to curb so many of these people who are feeling wrong or afraid or rejected. It has helped to sort of bring people into this place of acceptance. And I do believe that as more, as there's more acceptance, more conversations about it, more sort of openness to the idea, especially the people who have traditionally treated it as something that they're afraid of or something that makes them feel weak, like the military, like the police force, like people in the LGBTQ community, that will create, I think that's going to be a massive step towards creating this utopia, or at least, you know, the concept of utopia that's as good as we're going to get.
Yeah. And I think the really important thing to keep in mind too with all this is that there's so many things in the world right now where you have to fight so hard to even like get people to accept your basic belief, that if you find out you're wrong afterward, you have to eat so much crow. People will just like, sort of cling to a belief that they now realize is incorrect because they don't want to like have to suffer through like being ridiculed or whatever when they have to change their mind. But I think that's a natural part of life, is realizing that we're wrong and we made mistakes and we're going to grow. And I think it's also why as you get older, people tend to take fewer strong stands about things, because you're like, I've been wrong about everything this far, so I'm probably wrong right now too. I'm
just going to be quiet and listen.
Either that or they get all the stronger. Like it's there's no middle ground. It's either, you know, I've made mistakes in my past, I'm going to, you know, try to learn, or I'm right. I've always been right. I have never made a mistake in my life. No one can tell me I'm wrong. Those are kind of the dichotomies of old people.
Yeah, pretty much.
Lisa and I, we have this book that you answer questions about yourself, so your future kids can read it, or you can read it. It's a question every day, and one of them was, you know, what's your favorite characteristic about you? And I could have said, oh, I'm ambitious, or I love my nose. I don't know, and I put that I'm not afraid to be wrong. I mean, I'm afraid, but I'm not afraid to admit it. And what really irks me, though, is whenever I admit that I'm wrong and I say, yeah, you're right. When people say, told you. And I'm like, well, that just really makes me not want to say that I'm wrong. And it really bothers me. And it just bugs me. But I think that was one of my, not tooting my own horn, but I've always been that way. So whenever I have an altercation, I always go back and, you know, like, were they just having a bad day? You know, but we have to get into the reading, because
we're like
fans get mad about not get real quick though. Fun fact, there is a law in Texas called the mutual duel, that if you agree and you handshake or sign on it, you can have a legal duel of fists in the street in public. And that is like Texas. It's not just in Texas, but it's even police officers know about it.
It's probably sort of like a hockey fight in the sense that they can't arrest you until it's over, and then you're going to be arrested.
You can even knock someone out, and that's usually the end. You just can't try to kill them. It's just if you feel there needs to be a physical altercation, you shake on it and you duel. I learned about that today. I'm like, Texas. Texas. Got to get my chewing tobacco out. Hold on. Okay, so Mal, the way we usually do this is you are the director. You tell us what you prefer, play what, who is the narrator. It's all up to you.
Oh God, I figured you guys would just figure all this out and I could just enjoy it.
You're audible publishing.
Right. Well, Mal, why don't you read Rika? Because you know exactly what she sounds like in your head. So.
Oh, I don't even have this up. You guys, when you wrote the email, you said you guys were doing it. I didn't know I had to do it.
Yeah, you're definitely part of this.
I would have like picked a shorter passage if I had to participate.
Well, I think this is 1,200 words, so we should knock it out pretty easily. And it's just Rika and Leslie. So I'll read the narrator. Stevie has been the one who traditionally does the female voices because he does them so well.
I do.
So if you want to read, if you've got it there in the email you sent me, if you want to read Rika, and Stevie will read Leslie. Is Leslie an AI?
No, Leslie's a friend that she's just talking to over the comms.
Okay.
All right. I had to find it. I'm like, do
you want me to email it to you?
No, I'm good. I found it.
Okay. So the in this scene, Rika and her team are taking a series of high rises that stand on the far side of a canal the Marauder forces are advancing toward. The high rises are held by the Nietzscheans, and they're filled with civilians to protect the railgun emplacements on their upper levels. To cross the park leading up the canal, the Marauders need the defensive positions taken down without killing the civilians. The scene starts with Rika, a mechanized warrior, atop one atop one of the high rises, waiting for the right moment to strike. It reminds me like we're about to start a D&D campaign. And I just read the introduction, you know, roll initiative.
Here's your little people on the board.
Is there anything I need to know about Leslie Mal, or is she just like a regular?
Leslie's a stealth operative. She's actually, ironically, since I'm wearing a cat outfit today, she's actually like has ears and a tail and everything.
Oh, cool.
Then maybe it's in it's destiny that you read her.
Yes. Oh, do you want to do Leslie and I can?
Oh, you do her.
Okay, I'll do Leslie.
Take it away, Stevie.
Oh, does she start? Oh,
Leslie starts.
Rika, what's going on up there?
Leslie sent.
You do a better girl voice than I do. Oh, nothing. Just dodging rail fire.
I've set explosives on 3 of their guns and am ready to take the 4th and fire on their own troops.
Leslie reported.
How come you get the easy targets?
Rika asked as she raced across the rooftop, trying to get enough distance to fire a uranium bolt at the railgun. She reached the far southwest corner just as the Neats locked onto her with the cumbersome weapon. She fired her GNR. The uranium bolt flew from her gun's muzzle, and she sighed with relief as it hit the railgun, tearing it in half and causing the weapon's energy coils to discharge into the soldiers nearby. Rika unslung her JE-78 and sent a series of pulse blasts into the Neats, pushing them back as she charged forward. One tripped after getting hit by a pulse and fell off the roof of the building. Another nearly followed, but managed to hang on to the edge. Air bursts from the artillery platform began to shower the adjacent buildings with EM and shrapnel, further lighting up the sky as Rika fired several high-caliber rounds into 2 more Neats. Then she kicked the hanging one off the roof.
Stars, I've missed killing Nietzscheans,
she said over Basilisk's net, surprising even herself with the visceral satisfaction in her mental tone.
It never gets old,
Leslie replied. And Rika saw a beam fire lance out from the Withermere Tower into the park across the canal. It wasn't aimed at the far side where 4th Platoon was advancing, but rather at the Nietzscheans.
Even better to do it with their own weapons.
Leslie's words were punctuated by explosions several floors down. Rika smiled, knowing that the Withermere Tower no longer posed a threat to the Marauders. As Rika emptied a magazine from her JE-78 into the last Nietzschean on the roof, she looked around at the other towers. The team on the tower to the west of the Withermere was in disarray, but the one to the east was braving the artillery fire and had slid one of their railguns to the edge of the roof. It fired at the advancing Marauders in the park, getting off 2 shots before one of Rika's uranium rounds slammed into the weapon, tearing it in half and showering the gun's crew with shrapnel. Rika glanced down as beam fire erupted from the lower floors in the adjacent building, lancing out into the night. She gauged the distance to the next tower and backed up 10 paces before taking off, running toward the edge of the building. She pushed off with her right foot, quickly reaching speeds over 100 kilometers per hour before making the jump and sailing through the air between buildings. The gleaming side of the adjacent structure rushed toward her, and Rika fired 4 ballistic rounds, shattering the plaza and the desk beyond. Her arms folded before her. Rika landed, rolled, and was up and running across the floor toward the Neats, who were firing electron beams out into the night. The first Nietzschean soldier flew from the building before she knew it hit her, and the second followed suit shortly after. The next 2 were firing at Rika, and she dove to the side, firing her JE-78's pulses on full power. One of the remaining 2 flew out the window, but the other managed to grab onto the edge of the sill, hanging on for dear life as Rika approached.
You guys really need to learn when to quit,
Rika said as she stepped on his hand, crushing it beneath her foot. The Nietzschean screamed in response, and Rika lifted her foot, not even watching as the man fell to his death. She stooped down, grabbed his crew-serve beam rifle, shouldered its battery pack, and walked to the east side of the floor. Rika kicked the window and it shattered, giving her an unobstructed view of the next building. She steadied the beam weapon and took aim. Then she held the weapon's trigger down, firing a continuous beam into the next building, targeting the floors from which the Nietzscheans were firing on the advancing Marauders. The offending building was set back a dozen meters from the one Rika was in, and she had a clear shot. She hit one of the enemy positions, then another. She was sweeping the beam across the building when an enemy beam fired back, catching the side of her building half a meter from where she stood. Rika collapsed, her limbs convulsing as the electrical discharge overcame her motor controls. She couldn't get her legs to respond, so she pulled herself back with her left arm while her robotic limbs ran a full reset. Several primary controllers were shorted out. She switched over to secondary systems. You okay?
Okay.
Oh.
No, go for it. You're good, man.
You okay? Barn asked. I see a crazy spike on your systems.
Yeah.
Rika said as her legs began to respond to commands.
Got a bit too close to a beam.
You operational? Barn asked.
Yeah, how are we doing down there?
I'm moving neats down like it's going out of style.
Mowing.
I'm sorry, mowing. Sorry.
Moving.
Leslie announced. Rika looked back at the Withermere Tower and saw beam fire continuing to rain down onto the park.
We'll probably be getting up your stairs soon.
Rika commented, knowing that no one would be taking the elevators since the railgun had destroyed the A-grav systems.
Nah.
Leslie replied, her words punctuated by an explosion 1 floor down from her position.
Not my first day on the job.
We're closing with the canal, Clancy said over the platoon's combat net. Cover our flanks. Rika saw weapons fire lance out from the building and that had fired on her, and she rose to her feet once more. She set off for the stairwell. She didn't bother with the stairs. She leapt from landing to landing until she reached the door at the top and burst out onto the roof. 2 Nietzscheans were still alive next to the railgun that Rika had shot previously. She fired her pulse rifle at them as she ran by and didn't even look back before jumping off the edge of the roof and into the next building. Rika landed 1 floor too high and debated the best way to get to the floor below. She opted for speed and shot out a window before sliding over its edge and down to the next floor. She came down right on top of a pair of neats and she pushed one of them, and the crew-served weapon out the window. Then Rika turned her purloined weapon on the remaining Nietzscheans and incinerated them. With the floor clear, Rika turned back to the windows and laid the platoon's combat net over her vision. The locations of Nietzschean troops in the park appeared, and she fired into them, her barrage joining in with Leslie's and creating a clear path for the platoon to reach the canal. 8 minutes later, the entire platoon had made it across the water. The artillery platform flattened the rest of the park, clearing the way for the 3rd and 4th platoons, who were not far behind. Fighting lit up the streets at the base of the towers at the water's edge as the marauders engaged the Nietzscheans. Rika and Leslie brought their beams to bear in those conflicts, and, meter by meter, the Nietzscheans fell back under the marauder assault. Very cool.
That was awesome.
It's intense as when else read your stuff. I'm like finding errors. I'm like, oh, I could have worded that better, and that might be unclear.
Absolutely. Oh, I get that all the time with my own readings.
Definitely. It reminded me of a James Bond scene when he's running and chasing after somebody.
Yeah, well, the thing that I guess that I probably should have also mentioned in the beginning is that Rika's a mechanized soldier, so she actually she doesn't have arms or legs. She has robotic limbs, and her right arm is actually a rifle that fires a couple different modes. One of them is it fires DPUs, which is like the same type of thing that the main gun in the M1 Abrams tank fires. She just happens to fire it off of her arm. And things like electron beams, because everything I have is like actually like well-researched science fiction. So electron beams is actually firing beams of electrons at the speed of light. So it's basically firing a bolt of lightning at people. And it's hot as a bolt of lightning. So, and then of course when it hits, it like showers electrons everywhere and stuff like that.
Sounds fatal.
It's something you don't want to get hit with.
Slightly fatal.
Yeah. And like her low power weapon is basically a 50 cal machine gun.
That's her small one.
That's her little one. You know,
she's like
it's cool how mechanical weapons will basically continue to exist forever because there is something utterly reliable about a weapon like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, your electron beam, you can't fire it up close because it's going to like electrocute you if you shoot it too close, you know. And her DPU, it's a sabot round, so it has to take time to come apart. That's why at one point it mentioned she would need to get more room to fire it. Because if she fired it too close, the sabot wouldn't fall off and it wouldn't do what it was supposed to do. So,
so mechanized. She's kind of like Elysium, except Elysium, Matt Damon had arms.
Yeah, it's a lot like that. It's like if you merge like Starship Troopers from the book with Elysium, and then she's actually about 9 feet tall as well and stuff like that. Like her legs unfold with an extra limb.
Whoa, 9 feet tall. I was picturing just like you, Mal, running rooftop.
But yeah, so, and the whole thing about that whole story is that Rika did not want to get turned into a mechanized soldier. She was actually turned into a mech by her own military, and then they lost the war. So she got stuck.
Oh God! So she's like a merc now.
Yeah. So now she's a mercenary trying to basically keep herself in parts and power because your body doesn't work that well when when you have to it doesn't self heal. You have to go into the shop.
I like that idea. It reminds me of that one anime-ish movie that just came out, Battle Aeon. Not Aeon.
Alita Battle Angel.
Battle Angel. Yeah. So she has to go get fixed up and stuff.
Yeah.
I watched that movie twice. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I like that movie a lot too.
Right up until the ending, when they let all of the good plot threads just kind of go nowhere. Oh,
I'm hoping a second one's going to come out.
Not.
I know. That's what I heard.
After that, I don't think they're going to do another one.
Yeah.
It's an anime though, isn't it? So you can go read it, or it's a
there's like a whole bunch of books, graphic novels and stuff, I think.
Man, I really enjoyed the mech battles and stuff in that movie.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we're out of time, Mal. Really appreciate you coming on air. It was fascinating. Geez, you know so much about physics. I'm just going to start messaging you on Facebook for all my questions. How does a lightsaber work?
It doesn't.
Yeah. So, Mal, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Sure. If you want to read my books, you can find me on Amazon just by searching for MD Cooper or Aeon 14. That's AEON 14. And you can also find all my books on aeon14.com. And if you're interested in starting these stories, a great one to start with that's sort of a swashbuckling pirate / military series. The book's called Destiny Lost, and it's only 99 cents right now. And if you want to read more about Rika and these crazy mechs who just run around smashing Nietzscheans all day long, you can find the book Rika Outcast, which is also only 99 cents. And both of those books are on Audible too.
Very cool. I loved the fact that you have Nietzscheans as a thing. Like, I don't know the origin, but I love the fact that somehow people are like following Nietzsche's teaching and they are enemies. It was amazing. It's like calling like Mozartians, like the most random thing, but it's cool to think about an evolution that gets them there.
Well, he had the whole master morality thing. His whole premise is that basically if you can do whatever you want, you should. Effectively, that's like the 1 second version of it. But so I thought okay, make some people based around that.
Awesome.
I love it. Well,
you heard Mal. Go check out our books on Amazon. Just search MD Cooper, and you can start at Destiny's Lost, right? Destiny Lost. That's 99 cents. Swashbuckling. That's all you got to know is just swashbuckling, because that's one of my favorite things. So that's all you need to know. And just go check out our covers too. They're freaking awesome. And it just makes me look at mine. I'm like, oh no, I like my, but sorry. Mal did not hold back. So guys, thank you so much for coming to hang out on the Fantasy Fiends show. We really appreciate you. If you want to really help us out, you could share this on Facebook and also hit that subscribe button, because you got to see more of me, don't you? No, I'm kidding. And hit that like button. Mal, thanks again so much for coming on the air with us.
It's been a blast.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Andy,
sure.
Is there anything else?
Just
Monday.
Tune back in Monday night at 6 o'clock Pacific time, which is 8 Central or 9 Eastern, when we have another episode of Deranged and Questing, the Necromancer's Idiot Apprentice. And your boy Stevie's going to be playing our young
It's like
Abelard,
a kid, right?
Yeah, 15-year-old Necromancer's Apprentice who is absolutely incompetent.
Great.
Which is, I feel like it's just the character was made for you, Steve.
So
it's like a role he was born to play.
Me at 15 years old, basically. Not bad.
Essentially, if you happen to work for a necromancer and clumsily dropped a phylactery filled with thousands of souls in the middle of a battle and absorbed all of them into your own body. Very, very realistic sequence of events.
I would drop something. I'm clumsy. Yeah.
Happened one time. It was terrible.
It was terrible. It was just bedridden for a couple of days. Mal, we got to have you back on the air. This has been freaking awesome. Anytime we talk Bible too, I get excited. So it was a great episode for me too.
Supposed to do. We talked Bible, religion.
God, we covered everything. We solved all the world's problems today.
We even did high heels. Like that's how good this was.
The spectrum was like this. Just guys, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you Monday and then again on Thursday. Mal, arigato. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me.
Have a
See you
good
later,
night,
everybody.